Welcome to the World War Archive. I'm your host, Jim Beaver, and today we will be exploring a story that changed the world forever. A story of brilliant minds racing against time, of secrets that could destroy civilizations, and of a scientific achievement so profound that it still shapes our world today. This is the story of the Manhattan Project, the most ambitious, secretive, and consequential scientific endeavor in human history. Picture this. It's 1939. Hitler's armies are marching across Europe, and in laboratories from Cambridge to Chicago, scientists are unlocking the very secrets of the atom itself. What they discovered would either save the world from fascism or destroy it entirely. Sometimes the line between salvation and annihilation is thinner than we'd like to admit. Step into history's most defining conflicts with the World War Archive by Skoob, an immersive, AI-driven podcast experience that brings World War I and World War II to life in vivid, unforgettable detail. From the Holocaust to the Hiroshima-Nagasaki bombing, each episode dives deep into extraordinary stories of strategy, sacrifice, and survival that still echo through time. If you're fascinated by real-world drama, historical turning points, and untold tales of resilience, World War Archive is your essential listen. Discover how wartime breakthroughs, secret operations, and diplomatic showdowns shaped the modern world, all in fast-paced, tailor-made episodes that match your curiosity. Whether you're into code-breaking, frontline heroics, or the global impact of 2 world wars, Skoob transforms history into your next can't-stop-listening obsession. Download Skoob on the App Store or Play Store today and experience the past like never before. The story begins not with American ambition, but with fear. Raw, paralyzing fear of what Adolf Hitler might achieve if he got there first. By 1939, as Hitler's forces invaded Poland, the scientific community was electrified by a terrifying possibility. The immense energy-binding particles in the nucleus could be released, and materials like uranium-235 would become the key to unimaginable power. Einstein's special theory of relativity had suggested this possibility, but now it was becoming reality. The remarkable scientific breakthroughs of 1939 represent one of history's most dramatic and unsettling coincidences. In January 1940, a review article managed to summarize over 100 crucial publications from the preceding year. Among the most significant was work by Danish physicist Niels Bohr and his American pupil J.A. Wheeler, which explained the fission process and appeared just 2 days before the outbreak of war. Think about that timing. Just 2 days. The path to this moment had been building throughout the 1920s and 1930s. High-energy physics emerged as a rapidly growing field in the 1920s. By 1932, as Germany moved toward Nazism under Hitler, significant scientific advancements began manifesting across Europe and North America. J.D. Cockcroft and E.T.S. Walton at the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge managed to split the atom. Their colleague, Sir James Chadwick, discovered the neutron, consisting of a proton and an electron, which possessed a binding energy of 12 million electron volts. 2 years later, in 1934, the Joliot-Curies in France successfully created artificial radioactive isotopes. Around the same time, Enrico Fermi in Italy was able to slow down, or control, neutrons and subsequently produced transuranic elements, surpassing those listed on the atomic table. But here's where the story becomes deeply human, deeply personal. From the onset, applied atomic physics was imbued with ideological and ethical dimensions. The concept of the atomic bomb emerged predominantly from the Western scientific community, which was heavily populated by Jewish refugees, many of whom lived in fear that Hitler might be the first to develop such weapons. One of these scientists, Leo Szilard, initiated a self-imposed censorship on scientific publications related to nuclear physics. Imagine that, scientists voluntarily silencing themselves because they understood the deadly implications of their discoveries. Fear served as the primary motivator throughout this entire enterprise. Robert Oppenheimer, a Jewish scientist, was instrumental in building the first atomic bomb due to his concern that Hitler would develop it first. Edward Teller, a Hungarian physicist, pursued the development of the first hydrogen bomb, driven by his anxiety over a potential Soviet nuclear monopoly. In a very real sense, Hitler and the terrifying possibilities associated with his ambitions were the true catalysts behind the creation of the atomic bomb. The British were the first to move decisively. In March 1940, Otto Frisch and Rudolf Peierls, working at Birmingham University, circulated a remarkable memorandum that succinctly described how to construct a bomb using enriched uranium, all within 3 typed pages, 3 pages that changed the world. Subsequently, the high-powered Maud Committee was established to quickly develop this concept. The committee was whimsically named after Maud Ray, a governess. Sometimes history turns on the most ordinary details. In June 1940, the Maud Committee was joined by a French nuclear team who had managed to bring the entire available supply of heavy water, 185 kilograms worth, from Norway. Initially stored at Wormwood Scrubbs Prison, this precious material was later moved to the library at Windsor Castle. Imagine the future of atomic warfare sitting quietly among dusty books in a royal library. Meanwhile, Einstein himself, fearing an anti-Semitic axis acquiring the bomb, convinced President Roosevelt to establish a uranium committee in October 1939. This committee was invigorated into action in the fall of 1940 after British war effort leaders Sir Henry Tizard and Sir John Cockcroft traveled to Washington with a black box containing vital secrets of the British atomic program. At that period, Britain was several months ahead of other nations in atomic research and was progressing rapidly. By December 1940, plans for a separation plant had been completed, and by March of the following year, the atomic bomb ceased to be mere speculative science, transitioning into the realm of industrial technology and engineering. By July 1941, the Maud Committee had completed a report titled Use of Uranium for a Bomb, arguing that such a weapon, anticipated to be ready by 1943, would be significantly cheaper per pound than traditional explosives, more efficient in air power, deliver a more concentrated impact, and could profoundly demoralize the enemy. But here's the chilling part. Even if the war concluded before the bomb could be made available, the effort remained crucial since no nation would dare face the risk of lacking access to such a decisive weapon. In this sense, the atomic bomb was already perceived as a permanent feature of global relations beyond Hitler's era. The nuclear age had begun, born from fear and necessity, nurtured by brilliant minds, and destined to reshape human civilization forever. Now, you might think that the Manhattan Project was purely about physics and chemistry, but you'd be wrong. Hidden within this massive endeavor was another revolution entirely, the birth of the computer age. And at the center of this revolution was one of the most remarkable minds of the 20th century, John von Neumann. Picture a man who could divide 2 8-digit numbers in his head, who could memorize and recite verbatim pages from telephone books in any of 5 languages, and who at 6 years old engaged in humorous exchanges with his father in classical Greek. This was John von Neumann, born in Budapest in 1903 to a prosperous Jewish family. Von Neumann's brilliance became the stuff of legend. Edward Teller, a key figure in the development of the hydrogen bomb, once suggested that future superhuman intelligence might resemble von Neumann's capabilities. But what made von Neumann truly special wasn't just his intellect. It was his ability to synthesize ideas across multiple disciplines. His upbringing was a blend of intellectual and cultural richness. His father, Max Neumann, was awarded a hereditary title in 1913 for his financial accomplishments, allowing the family to be known as Margitai Neumann, or von Neumann in German. His father dabbled in amateur poetry and believed deeply in the expressive power of poetry as a medium for emotions and philosophical thought, a belief that von Neumann would later carry into his work in computer science and cognitive studies. But von Neumann's path to the Manhattan Project was shaped by the turbulent politics of early 20th century Europe. When Hungary briefly came under the control of communist Béla Kun in 1919, von Neumann's education continued in Vienna and the Adriatic region, experiences that fostered a lasting antipathy towards communism, an attitude that would later influence his work on nuclear weapons. By 1930, he was teaching quantum physics at Princeton University and soon joined the esteemed founding faculty of the Institute for Advanced Study alongside Albert Einstein and Kurt Gödel. It was at Princeton that von Neumann encountered Alan Turing, forming a duo that history often considers as seminal theorists in the realm of general-purpose computing. The contrast between these two men was fascinating. While Turing led a notably ascetic lifestyle preferring simplicity, von Neumann exuded sophistication. He was renowned for hosting lively and fashionable gatherings, with his voluminous house often the scene of intellectual and social exchange. Turing was a dedicated runner, while von Neumann abstained from physical exercise, favoring a lifestyle with luxurious indulgences, such as his annual purchase of new and extravagant Cadillacs. Von Neumann's fascinating persona was complemented by his endearing mannerisms. He was known for his fondness for humorous storytelling and dining with gusto. Yet beneath these traits lay a fervent pursuit of understanding and innovation. Then came the war, and von Neumann's work with explosive shock waves at Los Alamos drew him into the Manhattan Project. The development of atomic weaponry demanded complex calculations so intricate that they pushed existing computational methods to their limits and beyond. This challenge prompted von Neumann to explore the potential of high-speed computers. His exploration included examining computational machinery at Bell Labs and Harvard, notably Howard Aiken's Mark I. It was an era when computational methods and tools were undergoing transformational changes, and von Neumann's engagement was a catalyst in this evolution. Von Neumann's remarkable ability to synthesize ideas became even more evident through his interactions with various research teams. By 1944, he was deeply immersed in the dynamics of computing, hopping between the likes of Bell Labs, Princeton, Harvard, and Aberdeen to absorb and integrate emerging ideas, serving computational advancements much as a bee facilitates cross-pollination among flowers. His presence was keenly felt among leaders like Grace Hopper, with whom he collaborated closely on the Mark I project. But the limitations of existing computational devices, marred by slow mechanical switches and cumbersome reprogramming methods, galvanized von Neumann toward an electronic computer system capable of storing and modifying programs within internal memory. A serendipitous encounter with Hermann Goldstein at Aberdeen soon tethered von Neumann to the burgeoning work on the ENIAC, an electronic numerical integrator designed by Eckert and Mauchly. Their collaborations were characterized by mutual intellectual respect and ambition. Von Neumann's influence on computing architecture became most notable as he embraced and refined the idea that a program should be stored in the same space as its data, known today as the von Neumann architecture. His involvement with the ENIAC team revolutionized their existing approach, proposing that incorporating a centralized programming device would allow for dynamic innovation and function. But here's what made von Neumann special: his inclusive approach to idea sharing and attribution. He insisted on distributing recognition fairly, despite taking some credit himself. Meanwhile, he worked to construct an approachable language to simplify the switching of instructions during program runs, laying a foundational blueprint for modern computing. His advocacy and proposals led to the development of EDVAC, a machine that would advance the design standard from decimal to binary and incorporate many elements of the soon-to-be famous von Neumann architecture. The atomic bomb required unprecedented computational power, and in meeting that need, von Neumann and his colleagues inadvertently launched the computer revolution. The machines that calculated the physics of nuclear explosions would evolve into the computers that power our modern world. It's one of history's most profound ironies. The effort to create the ultimate weapon of destruction also gave birth to the technology that would transform human communication, commerce, and creativity. The same mathematical principles that modeled atomic fission would eventually power everything from space exploration to social media. July 16, 1945. 4 a.m. The Jornada del Muerto, the dead man's journey, in the New Mexico desert. A steel tower stands alone against the vast desert landscape, holding 4 tons of plutonium and high explosives. This is Trinity, and the entire future of warfare hangs in the balance. Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer paces restlessly in the control center, 6 miles away from the steel monolith. The plan was to detonate the device at dawn, but violent thunderstorms threaten to disrupt everything. The steel structure stands like an immense lightning conductor, potentially vulnerable to the fierce forces of nature. Richard Hornig, the scientist overseeing the setup, doesn't want to contemplate what might happen if lightning strikes the 4-ton nuclear device perched atop it. The atmosphere is thick with tension. People nervously bite their nails or chain smoke in desperate attempts to calm their nerves. General Groves, the commanding figure of the Manhattan Project, is increasingly frustrated, directing his ire at the weatherman as though he were personally responsible for the storm. But why was this test so critical? Oppenheimer had fought hard to secure permission for Trinity against General Groves's initial skepticism. Groves was concerned about the limited supply of plutonium available for experimental purposes, but Oppenheimer was firm. Without an actual test, doubts regarding the weapon's potential efficacy in combat would persist. The prospect of a nuclear explosion was unprecedented. Scientists' predictions of the energy it would release varied greatly, and there were whispers of doubt among some Los Alamos scientists about whether it would function at all. The device, ominously referred to as the gadget, represented months of intense preparation. As early as May 1944, Oppenheimer had sought a site suitable for this unprecedented test. The leaders of the Manhattan Project scoured areas across New Mexico, Texas, and California, searching for a suitably remote and flat piece of land where the device could be tested safely. It was Kenneth Bainbridge, an experimental physicist, who pinpointed the New Mexico desert as the ideal location. Situated about 230 miles south of Los Alamos, the chosen site was a secluded section of the Alamogordo Air Base. Oppenheimer christened the test Trinity, deriving inspiration from a line in a poem by John Donne. Bainbridge faced an enormous challenge: constructing a fully operational scientific laboratory in this desolate, arid landscape. Crews erected the imposing steel tower and established 3 reinforced concrete bunkers for the Manhattan Project scientists to observe safely from a distance. They transformed a nearby ranch house into a field laboratory and military police outpost. The rough roads leading to the site were paved to facilitate smooth transport of personnel and equipment. Miles of wiring and cabling were installed in preparation for both the detonation and subsequent research. Radiation concerns were paramount. There was serious apprehension about ensuring the blast's radioactive fallout would dissipate into the stratosphere, and the Army stood ready to evacuate nearby residents if necessary. Technicians in the bunkers were armed with maps of possible escape routes, a sobering reminder of the unprecedented nature of what they were attempting. In early July, the final preparations began. On July 11th, Oppenheimer bid farewell to his wife, Kitty, fully aware he wouldn't return home until the test was completed. On July 14th, a meeting was held in Albuquerque with military officials who flew in from Washington to witness the historic event. That same evening, scientists conducted a trial run of Hornig's triggering device, which had, until then, performed flawlessly. George Kistiakowsky, Hornig's supervisor, provided reassurance that the device would operate without a hitch on the critical day. But now, with hours to go, Mother Nature seemed determined to interfere. The summer storm raged with lightning and thunder, making the test impossible. Much like President Truman, dealing with global matters on the other side of the world at the Potsdam Conference, everyone at Trinity was bound in anticipation, powerless to change the weather. The Army meteorologist kept reassuring everyone that the tempest would soon pass, but this wasn't enough to dissipate the anxiety. The air was electric, literally and figuratively. This test was vital to assess the plutonium bomb's viability. While confidence was stronger in Little Boy, the uranium core atomic bomb that would eventually be dropped on Hiroshima, Fat Man, the plutonium bomb destined for Nagasaki, required validation of its complex implosive design. The complexity of Fat Man was staggering. Unlike the relatively simple gun-type design of Little Boy, the plutonium bomb required precise timing of multiple explosive lenses to compress the plutonium core uniformly. If the timing was off by even microseconds, the bomb would fizzle rather than explode. Scientists stationed at Ground Zero were prepared to measure critical data, including the implosion's symmetry and the energy released. They had instruments designed to capture every aspect of the explosion in the fraction of a second it would last. As dawn approached, the storm began to subside. The tension was almost unbearable. Years of work, billions of dollars, and the future of the war all came down to this moment in the desert. At 5:29:45 a.m., Trinity exploded. The flash of light was visible 200 miles away. The sound came later, a deep, rumbling roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. The mushroom cloud rose to 40,000 feet, and the desert sand beneath ground zero was fused into a green, glassy substance later named Trinitite. Oppenheimer later recalled his thoughts at that moment, quoting the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds." But in the immediate aftermath, his reaction was simpler and more human. It worked. Kenneth Bainbridge, who had built the test site, had a different reaction. "Now we are all sons of bitches." The nuclear age had officially begun. Within weeks, the world would witness the devastating power that had been unleashed in the New Mexico desert. But first, a president needed to be told what his scientists had accomplished. April 25, 1945, the Oval Office. President Harry S. Truman had been in office for less than 2 weeks, thrust into the presidency by Franklin Roosevelt's sudden death. He was about to learn about the most momentous secret in American history. General Leslie Groves and Secretary of War Henry Stimson entered with a comprehensive 24-page report. As Truman settled in to read his copy, Stimson and Groves reviewed another. The atmosphere was one of anticipation, not unlike the upcoming premiere of an opera, except what they were discussing would reshape global politics forever. The report began by clarifying the purpose behind the development of the atomic bomb, emphasizing its potential as a weapon of immense power. It suggested that such a weapon could be decisive in hastening the war's conclusion, thereby preserving American lives and resources. But the numbers Groves presented were staggering. Each bomb could yield an explosive power equivalent to 5,000 to 20,000 tons of TNT, with the potential to reach up to 100,000 tons in the future. To put this in perspective, the largest conventional bombs of World War II contained about 10 tons of explosives. A single atomic bomb would have the power of 1,000 such bombs. The detailed report delved into the technical aspects of atomic fission, explaining how the bomb was being constructed. It traced the project's history, highlighting its beginnings in 1939, the shift from research to manufacturing, and the extraordinary security measures in place to maintain secrecy. Think about the scale of what Truman was learning. This project had been running for years, involving facilities scattered across the entire country, employing over 130,000 people, and costing what would be billions in today's dollars, all without his knowledge as vice president. The report also contained disturbing intelligence about foreign interest in atomic weapons. Since 1943, Russia had displayed significant interest in the project through its diplomatic, informational, and espionage networks within the United States. The Soviets were watching, and they were learning. Regarding Germany, the report acknowledged the presence of prominent scientists within its atomic field and referenced past reports dating back to 1941, which speculated that Germany was on the brink of deploying an atomic bomb. However, with the fall of the Nazi regime, there seemed to be no likelihood of Germany utilizing an atomic bomb in the current war. But it was the report's conclusion that must have given Truman pause. While atomic energy, if governed by major peace-loving nations, could secure global peace for decades, its misuse had the potential to annihilate civilization itself. President Truman engaged Stimson and Groves with numerous questions. He expressed astonishment that a project of such magnitude and cost, featuring facilities scattered across the country, had been kept under wraps. When he inquired about the bomb's readiness, Stimson reiterated what was stated in his memo. It would be operational within 4 months. Truman comprehended the bomb's potential to dramatically shorten the war, but he was also apprehensive about the immediate implications for international relations, particularly concerning Russia, and the long-term impacts on global stability. The complexity of the technical report was overwhelming. "I don't like to read papers," Truman admitted to Groves, who replied that it was impossible to present the information more succinctly given the project's complexity. Despite the weight of what he was learning, President Truman left no ambiguity about his support for the project. The entire briefing and review took only 45 minutes. 45 minutes to discuss a weapon that would change the world forever. Remarkably, Truman opted not to retain his copy of the Groves report, deeming it too sensitive to keep in his possession. Following the meeting, Stimson departed the Oval Office to return home for his customary afternoon nap, as if nothing extraordinary had just occurred. But something extraordinary had occurred. A president who had been completely unaware of the Manhattan Project's existence just hours before was now the sole authority for deciding how and when to use the most powerful weapon ever created. Truman's response was characteristically decisive. Unlike Roosevelt, who had maintained a policy of measured restraint toward Stalin, Truman was notably more anti-communist from the outset. He saw the atomic bomb not just as a weapon to end the war with Japan, but as a tool of diplomacy in dealing with the Soviet Union. This approach would have profound consequences. Truman and his Secretary of State, James F. Burns, believed that a strong posture backed by atomic weapons was the right strategy for post-war negotiations with the Soviets, but they were making a critical miscalculation. They underestimated both Stalin's knowledge of the project and his likely response to nuclear diplomacy. Unknown to Truman, Stalin already knew about the Manhattan Project through Soviet espionage networks. The atomic bomb was not the secret bargaining chip Truman thought it was. As Truman prepared for the Potsdam Conference in July 1945, he was buoyed by reports of the successful Trinity test. He approached Stalin informally to mention that the United States possessed a significantly powerful new weapon. Stalin merely nodded in response, leading Truman and Prime Minister Winston Churchill to mistakenly believe that Stalin didn't grasp the implications. In reality, Stalin was already well informed about the Manhattan Project. He had been receiving detailed intelligence about America's atomic program for years, thanks to a network of spies who had penetrated the very heart of the project. The stage was set for a new kind of warfare, not just with atomic weapons, but with atomic secrets. And the players in this deadly game were already in motion. While President Truman was learning about the atomic bomb for the first time, Joseph Stalin had known about it for years. How? Through one of the most successful espionage operations in history, masterminded by brilliant scientists who had become Soviet spies. At the center of this web was Klaus Fuchs, a German-born physicist whose betrayal would reshape the global balance of power. Between 1941 and 1943, Fuchs managed to transmit roughly 570 pages of reports, calculations, technical drawings, formulas, and diagrams to the Soviet Union. These documents detailed the intricacies of uranium enrichment and comprehensively outlined the development processes of atomic weapons. But Fuchs didn't operate alone. His handler was one of the most remarkable spies of the 20th century, Ursula Kuczynski, codenamed Sonia. A German communist who had fled Nazi persecution, she had established herself in the English countryside, living the life of a quiet housewife while running one of the most productive spy networks in Britain. The mechanics of their operation were ingenious in their simplicity. The sheer complexity and technical nature of much of Fuchs's material precluded the possibility of coding and sending it via radio. Instead, Ursula would facilitate its transfer through clandestine means, using what intelligence professionals call a brush contact, an inconspicuous exchange that escaped the notice of ordinary observers. When Ursula needed to transmit urgent or bulky files, she would signal for a meeting using a predetermined method. This involved traveling to London, discreetly dropping a small piece of chalk and breaking it. 2 days after this signal, she would ride her bicycle to a designated meeting spot along a secluded road, located about 6 miles past the junction of the A40 and A34, on the route from Oxford to Cheltenham. There, Sergei Aptekar, a Soviet intelligence operative, would arrive in a military attaché's vehicle from London for the swift exchange of information. During one notable encounter, Aptekar provided Ursula with a new Minox camera capable of creating microdots and duplicating documents, as well as a compact but powerful transmitter measuring only 6 by 8 inches. Fuchs was deeply entrenched within the atomic project, privy to its most sensitive workings, and he shared everything he knew without reservation. In their first year of collaboration, Fuchs and Rudolf Peierls co-authored no fewer than 11 critical reports addressing topics such as isotope separation and the computation of the bomb's destructive capacity. According to his biographer, it was through Fuchs and Ursula that the Soviet Union gained access to virtually all scientific data generated by the British Tube Alloys project over more than a year. The Soviet Military Intelligence Organization, GRU, initially failed to recognize Fuchs's significance, but under Sonya's supervision, the espionage operation advanced rapidly. Their nuclear weapons initiative was given a Soviet codename, Enormos, reflecting the excitement in Moscow. Fuchs had requested that his information reach Stalin's desk directly, and this wish was granted, placing both he and Sonya firmly within Stalin's sphere of interest, an uncomfortable prospect, given Stalin's notorious unpredictability and ruthlessness. The impact was immediate and profound. In April 1942, Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov compiled an intelligence dossier with many insights originating from the United Kingdom regarding this emerging superweapon. He presented the file to the Minister for the Chemical Industry, relaying Stalin's directive to ascertain what actions were necessary. Soviet scientists advised swiftly initiating their own atomic bomb program. By the end of 1942, the State Defense Committee sanctioned the creation of a laboratory focused on developing a uranium bomb, headed by Igor Kurchatov of the Leningrad Physico-Technical Institute. By February 1943, Soviet atomic bomb scientists commenced serious efforts, their progress significantly accelerated by the substantial influx of secret material provided by Klaus Fuchs and Ursula Kuczynski. Meanwhile, the official collaboration between Britain and the United States was expanding. In October 1941, President Roosevelt had proposed to Prime Minister Churchill that they exchange correspondence on atomic research. With the United States entering the war 2 months later, this collaboration gained momentum. However, it soon became evident that the United States was outpacing other nations in atomic bomb development. The central focus and financial investment shifted to America, and the Manhattan Project, with Britain and Canada as junior collaborators, absorbed the Tube Alloys Project. This massive undertaking would eventually involve 130,000 personnel and culminate in the creation of the world's first nuclear weapon. But here's the cruel irony. While the official allies were sharing atomic secrets to defeat fascism, Soviet spies were stealing those same secrets to prepare for the next war. Fuchs, driven by ideological conviction and a genuine belief that the Soviet Union should possess atomic weapons to balance American power, was systematically betraying the very project he was helping to build. The consequences of this espionage would not become fully apparent until after the war, when the United States discovered that its atomic monopoly was far shorter-lived than expected. But the damage was already done. By the time Truman met with Stalin at Potsdam, the Soviet leader knew more about American atomic capabilities than most American officials. The age of atomic espionage had begun, and it would define the next half-century of global politics. But Fuchs was not the only atomic spy. Soon another network would be uncovered, one that reached deep into American society and would culminate in one of the most controversial executions in American history. The world wars weren't just chapters in history, they were global crossroads where the fate of nations and the future of humanity hung in the balance. Behind every front line were real people navigating impossible choices, groundbreaking innovations, and defining moments that still shape the world we live in today. If you've ever thought, why didn't they teach us this in school, or felt captivated by the human stories that make history feel real, then you'll want to follow the World War Archive by Skoob. Subscribe now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, and uncover the lesser-known episodes, the bold decisions, and the people who made history move. Returning to the Manhattan Project by 1950, the atomic secret was out, but the hunt for those who had stolen it was just beginning. The FBI had been methodically unraveling a spy network that reached into the very heart of the Manhattan Project, and their investigation was about to expose a conspiracy that would shock the American public. The breakthrough came through Harry Gold, a key figure in the espionage web. Gold claimed that a soldier stationed at Los Alamos had paid him $500 in exchange for confidential information about the implosion lens used in the atomic bomb. Though Gold couldn't recall the soldier's true identity, he suspected the soldier's wife might have been named Ruth and remembered that the soldier hailed from New York City. Just 2 days after these revelations, FBI agents presented Gold with a photograph of a man he confidently identified as the individual who had paid him. The man in the photograph was David Greenglass, a machinist who had worked on the Manhattan Project at Los Alamos. When brought in for questioning, Greenglass quickly confessed to being the Los Alamos soldier who had sold information to Gold. But it was his additional revelations that would etch this case into history. He disclosed that his wife, Ruth, and his brother-in-law, Julius Rosenberg, were also members of a Soviet spy ring. Julius Rosenberg had been deeply involved with communist ideologies from his youth. By 16, he was an active member of the Young Communist League at the City College of New York. Born to Polish Jewish immigrants, Rosenberg had grown up on Manhattan's Lower East Side and met his future wife, Ethel, at a union fundraising event. After earning an engineering degree from City College of New York, he started working as a civilian employee for the Army's Signal Corps in 1940. According to Greenglass, in late 1943, he and Julius had engaged in their first conversations about espionage. It was shortly after these talks began that Rosenberg chose to renounce his Communist Party affiliation, a move Greenglass believed was intended to avoid drawing unwanted attention. As Rosenberg became involved with Soviet espionage activities, he was keenly aware that a formal connection to the Communist Party would heighten suspicions. In 1944, Rosenberg allegedly asked his sister-in-law, Ruth, if Greenglass would provide him with notes on the Manhattan Project. Greenglass agreed and committed to supplying Rosenberg with intricate details about the high-explosive lens mold being perfected at Los Alamos for the atomic bomb. Throughout 1944, Greenglass passed vital information to Rosenberg, sometimes in person and at other times through intermediaries. The web of espionage was more extensive than anyone had imagined. While Klaus Fuchs was providing detailed theoretical and technical information to the Soviets, the Rosenberg network was focused on practical engineering details, the nuts and bolts of how to actually build the bomb. On June 16, 1950, FBI agents arrived in Brooklyn, New York, where Julius Rosenberg resided with Ethel and their 2 young sons. Detained for questioning, Rosenberg vehemently denied Greenglass's accusations, demanding to confront his accuser directly. The authorities released him temporarily, a tactic that Rosenberg recognized for what it was. Heightened by the pervasive paranoia of the Red Scare era, epitomized by figures like Senator Joseph McCarthy, who fueled fears of communist infiltration, Rosenberg knew his time was running out. Seeking legal defense, he enlisted the help of noted attorney Emanuel Bloch. In mid-July 1950, further revelations from David and Ruth Greenglass deepened the case against the Rosenbergs. The FBI obtained a warrant for Julius's arrest and returned to Brooklyn. Under the eyes of his 2 young sons, Julius Rosenberg was handcuffed and led away by agents while a search team combed his apartment for incriminating evidence. With Julius in custody, the FBI shifted its focus to his wife, Ethel. Turning once more to the Greenglasses, investigators unearthed claims that Ethel had been present during key discussions about Julius's espionage activities. They asserted that she had typed notes that subsequently made their way into Soviet hands. The involvement of both Julius and Ethel Rosenberg would lead to a pivotal courtroom drama that divided American public opinion. The case became a symbol of Cold War tensions, with supporters claiming the Rosenbergs were innocent victims of anti-communist hysteria, while prosecutors argued they had betrayed their country's most vital secrets. What made the Rosenberg case particularly tragic was the human element. Here were 2 young parents, driven by ideological conviction, who genuinely believed they were helping to create a more balanced world where no single nation held a monopoly on ultimate weapons. They saw themselves as idealists working for global peace, not as traitors undermining American security. But the timing couldn't have been worse. By 1950, the Soviet Union had successfully tested its own atomic bomb, shocking Americans who had expected their nuclear monopoly to last much longer. The rapid development of Soviet atomic capabilities seemed to confirm the worst fears about atomic espionage. The Rosenberg case would ultimately result in their execution in 1953, making them the first American civilians executed for espionage during peacetime. Their deaths marked a tragic end to one chapter of atomic espionage, but the damage had already been done. The secrets stolen by Fuchs, the Rosenbergs, and others had helped accelerate Soviet atomic development by years. What should have been a lengthy American nuclear monopoly became a brief period of atomic superiority, quickly followed by a dangerous arms race that would define the Cold War. The hunt for atomic spies had revealed the extent to which the Manhattan Project had been compromised, but it had also revealed something else: the atomic age would be characterized not just by the power of nuclear weapons, but by the deadly game of nuclear secrets. The successful Soviet atomic bomb test in August 1949 shattered American assumptions about nuclear security and marked the true beginning of the Cold War arms race. But the roots of this deadly competition lay in the immediate aftermath of World War II, when American leaders made critical decisions about how to use their newfound atomic power. President Harry Truman's approach to Stalin stood in stark contrast to his predecessors. While Franklin Roosevelt had believed that maintaining a posture of reason and measured restraint was most effective in dealing with the Soviet leader, Truman was notably more anti-communist from the outset of his political career. Truman's attitudes were shaped by his deep skepticism of both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Shortly after Germany's assault on the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941, then-Senator Truman had suggested that the United States could ensure both German and Russian casualties by strategically supporting whichever side was weaker at any given time. Though he made it clear he abhorred the idea of a Hitler victory, he had commented on the unreliability of both nations when it came to honoring their commitments. Henry Stimson, Roosevelt's Secretary of War who continued under Truman, foresaw dangerous consequences from the kind of atomic diplomacy Truman seemed poised to employ. Stimson warned that utilizing the atomic bomb as a bargaining chip would only intensify Stalin's natural suspicion and distrust. But Truman dismissed this caution, believing firmly that a strong posture backed by atomic weapons was the right strategy. The clash between these approaches came to a head at the London Conference of the Council of Foreign Ministers in September 1945. Truman's Secretary of State, James F. Burns, confronted Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov directly, saying that if the Soviets didn't progress in negotiations, he would metaphorically unleash the atomic bomb. Though intended as diplomatic pressure, both Molotov and Stalin understood the underlying threat. This atomic diplomacy backfired spectacularly. Far from being cowed by American nuclear threats, Stalin responded by accelerating the Soviet nuclear program. Even before Japan officially surrendered on August 15, 1945, Stalin had, on August 20th, ordered a secret, full-scale effort to develop Soviet nuclear capabilities without regard to cost. The irony is that Stalin was never as surprised by American atomic capabilities as Truman believed. At the Potsdam Conference in July 1945, while Truman was buoyed by reports of the successful Trinity test, he approached Stalin informally to mention that the United States possessed a significantly powerful new weapon. Stalin merely nodded in response, leading Truman and Winston Churchill to mistakenly believe that Stalin didn't grasp the implications. In reality, Stalin was already well informed about the Manhattan Project through Soviet espionage networks. The intelligence provided by Klaus Fuchs, the Rosenbergs, and other spies had given Stalin detailed knowledge of American atomic capabilities years before Truman learned about them himself. This intelligence advantage allowed Stalin to respond to American atomic diplomacy with confidence rather than fear. When Burns made his veiled nuclear threats, Stalin knew exactly what the Americans possessed, and he also knew that his own scientists, armed with stolen American secrets, were already working to close the atomic gap. The speed of Soviet atomic development stunned American leaders. Most Western experts had predicted it would take the Soviets at least a decade to develop nuclear weapons. Instead, they achieved their first successful test just 4 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This rapid development was largely due to the intelligence provided by atomic spies. Klaus Fuchs alone had provided enough detailed information to accelerate Soviet bomb development by years. The theoretical and practical knowledge stolen from the Manhattan Project meant that Soviet scientists didn't have to solve many fundamental problems from scratch. The successful Soviet test in August 1949 triggered a crisis in American strategic thinking. The 3-year-old Atomic Energy Commission was prompted into urgent action, embarking on ambitious programs not only to achieve hydrogen bomb capabilities, but also to map out and develop domestic uranium resources to counter possible foreign supply cuts. The nuclear arms race had officially begun. What followed was a deadly spiral of escalation that would characterize the entire Cold War period. Each side's development of new weapons prompted the other to develop even more powerful arsenals. Edward Teller, the Hungarian-American physicist who had worked on the Manhattan Project, became a driving force behind the development of the hydrogen bomb. His push for thermonuclear weapons was initially driven by intellectual curiosity but later by geopolitical strategy. Teller's advocacy significantly influenced American nuclear policy for decades. But Teller's approach was controversial even among his scientific colleagues. Enrico Fermi, despite his general reluctance to involve himself in political matters, was alarmed by the potential threat posed by Teller's hydrogen bomb proposals. Fermi co-authored a significant document urging the United States not to develop thermonuclear weapons, calling them evil creations. Jeremy Stone, president of the Federation of American Scientists, later provided a scathing assessment of Teller's influence. According to Stone, Teller's techniques included exaggeration and discrediting opposing views, significantly influencing arms control discussions and pushing forward various arms race escalating initiatives. The Soviet Union's knowledge of Teller's H-bomb project prompted their own hydrogen bomb development, further escalating the dangerous arms race. Stone argued that no scientist had wielded more influence on humanity's existential risks than Teller, suggesting that his unwavering focus on hydrogen bomb development may have endangered life on Earth more than any other individual in history. The pattern established in these early years of the Cold War would persist for decades, technological breakthrough followed by counter-breakthrough, each side pushing the boundaries of destructive capability in response to the other's advances. The atomic age, born from fear of Hitler's potential nuclear weapons, had evolved into a permanent state of mutual nuclear terror. The Manhattan Project had succeeded in ending World War II, but it had also created a new kind of warfare, one fought with secrets, spies, and the constant threat of annihilation. The Cold War arms race was the unintended consequence of the very success of the atomic bomb project. As the dust settled from World War II and the reality of nuclear weapons sank in, the scientists who had created the atomic bomb found themselves grappling with profound moral and practical questions about their creation. Many had entered the Manhattan Project motivated by fear of Nazi Germany acquiring nuclear weapons first, but now they faced a new reality, a world where nuclear weapons would be a permanent feature. The scientific community was deeply divided on how to respond to this new reality. Many scientists preferred to narrowly define their role within the confines of scientific discovery, avoiding political or social critique, which they saw as a distraction from or even contrary to scientific pursuits. But the unprecedented destructive power of nuclear weapons made such detachment increasingly difficult to maintain. Several scientists involved in the Manhattan Project began to grow uneasy as they recognized the implications of what they had created. Figures like Leo Szilard, James Franck, Harold Urey, and Robert R. Wilson started advocating for political leaders and the public to understand the impending dangers of an arms race with the Soviet Union, especially after the defeat of Nazi Germany. Their concern stemmed from a prescient awareness of the geopolitical tensions that would soon escalate. However, not all scientists agreed with this involvement in policy matters. Enrico Fermi, one of the most influential physicists of the Manhattan Project, voiced a sentiment held by many in his field. "I was put on Earth to make certain discoveries, and what the political leaders do with them is not my business." Yet even Fermi found himself drawn into political debates when faced with proposals for weapons of even greater destructive power. Despite his general reluctance to involve himself in political matters, Fermi was alarmed by the potential threat posed by Edward Teller's hydrogen bomb proposals. He co-authored a significant document urging the United States not to develop thermonuclear weapons, calling them evil creations. This internal conflict among scientists reflected a broader question about the relationship between scientific discovery and social responsibility. The Manhattan Project had demonstrated that scientific knowledge could have profound and immediate consequences for humanity, making the traditional separation between pure research and political application increasingly untenable. Meanwhile, scientists were also grappling with practical questions about the future of nuclear technology. In mid-1944, even before the war ended, Enrico Fermi and his team had formed a committee to explore the future prospects of nuclear power. Their deliberations culminated in a detailed 67-page confidential document entitled The Prospectus on Nucleonics. The term nucleonics, freshly coined by the committee, was derived to describe the emerging field of nuclear technology in a similar manner to electronics, focusing on the study of nuclei rather than electrons. The prospectus provided a comprehensive review of developments during the war and speculated on nuclear power's post-war trajectory, but the initial outlook for nuclear power was surprisingly dim. The document estimated that the total quantity of uranium available in high-grade ores on Earth is about 20,000 tons, of which about 10,000 tons are on this continent. This uranium volume would suffice to sustain 5 large reactors for approximately 75 years, contingent on the regular extraction and utilization of plutonium produced during reactor operations. Given the perceived scarcity of uranium, the report concluded that the energy available in 10,000 tons of uranium will not suffice to replace coal, other combustible materials, or falling water as a primary energy source. With current U.S. coal consumption at about 1 billion tons annually, the energy output from 10,000 tons of uranium would provide essentially 10 years' worth of coal-equivalent energy. Despite this bleak immediate outlook, the document optimistically anticipated potential breakthroughs in extracting uranium from low-grade ore sources and introduced thorium as a more plentiful alternative nuclear fuel. The prospectus also ventured into the potential of harnessing controlled thermonuclear fusion, targeting ocean water as a possible futuristic energy source. However, the document admitted that fusion energy remained elusive, portrayed as neither fantastic nor necessarily remote, yet still evading realization. Controlled thermonuclear fusion proved challenging due to the extreme temperatures required and the intricate technology needed to confine such reactions. The uranium scarcity concerns led scientists at key U.S. national laboratories like Oak Ridge in Tennessee and Argonne National Laboratory near Chicago to focus on breeder reactors as the only feasible path to sustainable nuclear power. A breeder reactor operated with a blanket of natural uranium to capture excess neutrons from fission, simultaneously producing energy and breeding plutonium for fuel. The complexity of this concept posed numerous research, design, and development challenges. Consequently, post-war efforts at Oak Ridge and Argonne labs predominantly emphasized fundamental nuclear technology research over immediate reactor advancement. This changed dramatically following the Soviet Union's successful atomic bomb test in August 1949. The Atomic Energy Commission embarked on ambitious programs to achieve hydrogen bomb capabilities and develop domestic uranium resources. In March 1951, the AEC more than doubled the previous offering price for high-grade uranium ore, incentivizing prospectors with rewards like a $10,000 bonus for discovering productive new mines. This initiative led to a uranium rush, with around 2,000 prospectors entering the field. The phenomenon captured popular attention, gracing magazine covers while Geiger countersales soared. By the mid-1950s, the AEC had reached a satisfactory uranium stockpile, and it became clear that acquiring more uranium was largely a matter of adjusting market prices. Interestingly, significant uranium deposits existed within coal itself. Lignite, or brown coal, exhibited a propensity to chemically bind with uranium, a characteristic first acknowledged in 1875. This tendency explained why uranium naturally accumulated in ancient tree deposits along streambeds over time. The scientific community's wrestling with nuclear technology reflected broader questions about the role of science in society. The Manhattan Project had demonstrated that scientific advances could have immediate and profound consequences for human civilization, forcing scientists to consider not just what they could discover, but what they should discover. Some scientists, like Leo Szilard, became lifelong advocates for nuclear arms control and peaceful uses of atomic energy. Others, like Edward Teller, believed that continued weapons development was necessary for national security. Still others tried to return to pure research, hoping to avoid the political implications of their work. But the genie was out of the bottle. The nuclear age had begun, and scientists would never again be able to work in isolation from the political and social consequences of their discoveries. The Manhattan Project had not only created nuclear weapons, it had fundamentally changed the relationship between science and society. As we reach the end of our journey through the Manhattan Project, it's worth reflecting on the profound and lasting impact of this unprecedented scientific endeavor. What began as a desperate race to beat Hitler to the atomic bomb evolved into something far more complex and consequential than its creators ever imagined. The Manhattan Project succeeded in its immediate goal. It ended World War II and prevented Nazi Germany from acquiring nuclear weapons, but its success also ushered in an era of unprecedented danger and complexity that continues to shape our world today. The project demonstrated humanity's incredible capacity for scientific achievement when resources, talent, and urgency align. In just a few years, scientists and engineers solved some of the most complex technical challenges in human history. They mastered the physics of nuclear fission, developed new materials and processes, created entirely new industries, and built weapons of unimaginable power. But the project also revealed the double-edged nature of scientific progress. The same knowledge that could power cities could also destroy them. The same peaceful atoms that promised abundant energy also threatened human extinction. This duality would define the nuclear age. The espionage that penetrated the Manhattan Project showed how scientific knowledge, once discovered, inevitably spreads beyond its creator's control. Klaus Fuchs, the Rosenbergs, and other atomic spies demonstrated that in an interconnected world, scientific secrets cannot remain secret forever. Their actions accelerated Soviet nuclear development and helped ensure that nuclear weapons would become a global phenomenon rather than an American monopoly. The project's computational requirements helped birth the computer age. John von Neumann's work on the ENIAC and EDVAC, driven by the need to model nuclear explosions, laid the groundwork for the digital revolution that would transform human civilization in ways that rivaled the atomic bomb itself. The debates among scientists about their role in creating nuclear weapons established precedents for how the scientific community grapples with the implications of breakthrough technologies. The tension between scientific curiosity and social responsibility, first articulated by Manhattan Project veterans, continues to influence discussions about everything from artificial intelligence to genetic engineering. The Manhattan Project also fundamentally changed the relationship between science and government. Before the war, scientific research was largely an academic pursuit with limited government involvement. After the war, big science became a permanent feature of national policy, with massive government investments in research and development becoming the norm. The arms race that followed demonstrated both the promise and the peril of technological competition between nations. The rapid development of increasingly powerful weapon systems showed how scientific competition could drive innovation, but it also revealed how such competition could threaten human survival. Perhaps most importantly, the Manhattan Project forced humanity to confront the reality that we had developed the power to destroy our own civilization. This realization fundamentally changed how we think about war, diplomacy, and international relations. The concept of mutually assured destruction, born from the nuclear standoff between superpowers, created a strange kind of peace, one based on the shared recognition that nuclear war would be catastrophic for everyone involved. The project's legacy extends beyond weapons to peaceful uses of nuclear energy. Despite early pessimistic assessments about uranium availability, nuclear power became a significant energy source, providing carbon-free electricity for millions of people worldwide. The same fission process that powered atomic bombs also powers nuclear reactors, demonstrating how destructive technologies can be transformed for constructive purposes. The search for controlled fusion energy, first outlined in the 1944 Prospectus on Nucleonics, continues today as scientists work to harness the same process that powers the sun. If successful, fusion power could provide virtually unlimited clean energy, representing the ultimate peaceful application of nuclear physics. The Manhattan Project also established the template for large-scale scientific collaborations. The project's scale, organization, and international cooperation provided a model for subsequent scientific endeavors, from the space program to modern particle physics experiments and climate research. Looking back, we can see that the Manhattan Project was a turning point in human history, comparable to the agricultural revolution or the industrial revolution. It marked the moment when humanity gained the power to fundamentally alter the planet and even threaten its own existence. The scientists who worked on the project understood this significance. J. Robert Oppenheimer's famous quote, "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds," captured the awesome responsibility that came with nuclear knowledge. Kenneth Bainbridge's simpler assessment, "Now we are all sons of bitches," reflected the moral complexity of their achievement. Today, as we face new technological challenges from artificial intelligence to genetic engineering to climate change, the lessons of the Manhattan Project remain relevant. How do we balance scientific progress with social responsibility? How do we ensure that powerful technologies serve humanity rather than threaten it? How do we govern technologies that transcend national boundaries? These questions don't have easy answers, but the Manhattan Project provides both cautionary tales and sources of hope. It shows us that human ingenuity can solve seemingly impossible problems when properly directed. It also shows us that the consequences of scientific breakthroughs often extend far beyond their creators' intentions. The atomic age began with fear of Hitler, fear of nuclear war, fear of scientific rivals. But it also embodied hope for abundant energy, hope for medical advances, hope for scientific understanding. As we continue to grapple with the legacy of the Manhattan Project, we must remember both its promise and its peril. The scientists who unlocked the secrets of the atom gave us both the power to destroy our world and the knowledge to save it. How we use that legacy will determine not just our future, but whether we have a future at all. The Manhattan Project ended in 1945, but the nuclear age it began continues today. The choices we make about nuclear weapons, nuclear energy, and nuclear knowledge will shape the world our children inherit. In that sense, we are all inheritors of the Manhattan Project's legacy, and we all bear responsibility for what we do with it. This is the true lesson of the Manhattan Project, that scientific knowledge is power, and with power comes responsibility. The atomic bomb was built by scientists who thought they were saving the world from fascism. In the end, they created something that could either destroy the world or transform it for the better. The choice of which path we take remains ours to make. I'm your host, Jim Beaver, and you've been listening to the World War Archive. Thanks for joining me as we explored the pivotal moments, brave decisions, and lasting legacies of the world wars. Stories that still echo in the headlines and choices we face today. If today's episode opened your eyes, challenged what you thought you knew, or made you want to learn more, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you're listening. And if you're ready for more bite-sized journeys into history, like covert wartime operations, untold personal accounts, and the ripple effects of global conflict, check out Skoob, your AI-powered podcast companion. Download it today from the App Store or Play Store and uncover the stories behind history, quicker, deeper, and more personally than ever. Until next time, remember that we are all living in the world that the atomic pioneers created. How we shape that world going forward is up to us.